Executive Director of Human Rights Watch for close to 30 years now, visiting professor at the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. And I want to thank Noel Zahabamwe, who is founder and chair of the African Australian Advocacy Centre, speaking to us from Australia, a survivor of the Rwandan genocide. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Thanks for joining us.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them, and not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
Hi, this is Al McFarlane, host of The Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 98.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is special because it's in our spring membership drive, and Miguel from the studio is with me. Miguel, how you doing, my buddy?
Hey, we're doing all right, Al. Thank you for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure to be here as a guest on The Conversation.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the guest, but we've got some important work to do. And the important work is to invite our listeners to become supporters, to become members of KFAI. And I wanted you to help me start the program off by letting people know what they need to do, what they can do, and why they should do it and do it right now. Miguel?
All right. If already you're sold on the idea of supporting community radio and, of course, community media platforms, you can call 612-375-9030. Or you can give online at kfai.org, whatever you feel comfortable doing. A big reason for supporting community radio is you kind of have to, when you're an independent, nonprofit community radio station, you kind of have to look at where the support usually comes from. A chunk of supporting comes from underwriting. Another chunk comes from state grants, like the Legacy Fund. But of course, a big part of the equation comes from financial support through listener members. And so listener member support has kept KFAI around for the past 46 years, but it's also what keeps us independent, so to say. We don't have a big brother looking over us, and then when they're decided that they're through with us, they collapse our organization or anything like that. So in order for us to kind of maintain that autonomy, that's where listener member support comes in. So you can call 612-375-9030 or give online at kfai.org.
Well, I'm going to bring you back in the program several times over the course of the hour, Miguel, just to remind our listeners that the work we do is critical work. It's important work, and the work is for you, our dear listener, and our dear community. And we know that you appreciate it. We know that you value this. When I'm out in the neighborhood, what's cool, Miguel, is I might be over at Seward Co-op, for example, purchase some groceries for my house, and somebody asked me my membership number. They say, "Oh, the voice, I know your voice," and so that's really great to know that people are tuned in, and that tuning also allows them to recognize a familiar sound in a different situation. So we know we're connecting with a lot of people everywhere, and not just in Twin Cities, but around the world. So listen, you know what to do. 612-375-9030, 612-375-9030. Call right now. Let's try to make it happen a lot in the course of this hour. Today's program, The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Well, with that, let me proceed. And we have on Tuesdays been bringing in our colleague, our sister leader friend, Coach Leah Jane Denley. And what a weekend it's been. Before I bring you in, Leah, let me say that I want to invite people to also support this program by becoming a subscriber. And it doesn't cost you anything. Just go to YouTube and click on the Insight News channel and subscribe grow our presence that way, locally, globally. We appreciate you. So, Leah Jean, how you doing? Big weekend.
Huge
Tell me about
weekend. Huge weekend. Yes, it was so much fun. I would tell you, it does. Sometimes when you have to take a whole day to just rest, to just recover from all the things that you did during the time that you were away. But it's an amazing weekend. We were the Tall Girls United. We had a tall girl takeover of Cleveland during the women's Final Four. And, I don't make any apologies for favoritism sometimes. I know we're supposed to be, non-biased as a journalist and things of that nature. And sometimes I pick and choose when I'm going to be unbiased. But I was all in rooting for Dawn Staley and South Carolina, and very, very happy to see that they were able to bring in their third championship in 7 years. Isn't that amazing?
Awesome. Amazing. I watched the game. I couldn't not watch it, and everybody I know is watching it as well. What was important to you? How did that, and I was worried because Clark came out so tough at the beginning, right? Just scoring all the points for Iowa. But I think Coach Staley's team had a plan to steady grind, right? Grind. And they delivered at the end of the day. But how did it sound to you?
Well, no doubt. Well, South Carolina's historically all this season has been that way. They've kind of come up a little bit slow out of the gate, which drove Dawn Staley and her staff crazy. She was referred to them as the daycare in a very loving way. And so I don't want to disparage that tone at all, but she meant that in a very, very loving way. And what that meant was, these youngsters, very confident in who they were, decided that they were going to show everybody that even though they keep things very light, sometimes it seemed like they weren't focused, but that they held each other accountable. And Dawn Staley took it upon herself to say, you know what, let me trust this group. Let me trust them. Let me trust that they are going to make sure that they are going to do what they need to do, even though we're going to prepare them properly, no doubt. As a coaching staff, we're going to prepare them properly, but we're going to trust them and their ability to win. And boy, did they. They are the only 10th team in all of NCAA history to have an undefeated season, men or women. So pretty phenomenal. Pretty phenomenal. So wanted to also mention that, of course, she drew a lot of criticism for how she responded during her post-game interviews. And I want to just read this as a quote. This is the unlikeliest group to do it. And sometimes, God is funny like that. He's funny. He rips your heart out and he makes you believe. He makes you believe the unimaginable. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in depth in my next article that will appear in the Insight News in the upcoming edition. So if you want to hear more about the post-game interviews and more about my insights in regards to that, make sure that you get our printed copies or our e-edition or at www.insightnews.com to learn more about that. But she's not a crier, and all those of us that know her were not. I wouldn't say we weren't surprised, but we were like, when we were hearing comments from other people, we were like, you know what, this is a different kind of moment for Dawn Staley because she's not a crier. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So
but she broke down. She broke down, and you could feel it. You felt her, and it wasn't crying, but it was just overwhelmed, I think. And it kind of like the anointing was on her. That's how I felt.
Absolutely. Like if she could do the praise dance right then, she would have, all the things. All the things. Yes. So, but let's pivot real quick to the men. So UConn, repeat champions. That is very, very hard to do. And so Bob Hurley's son, joins a very unique group that will, go on in history for NCAA on the men's side, because to repeat as champions back to back it just doesn't happen. It just does not happen. And so I'll be writing about that as well. So make sure you pick up the paper so that you can get some insights about UConn men repeating as champions. But I want to talk a little bit about our I tell people all the time that I'm 1 degree of separation from everybody on the planet, right? And so we've got our very own Khalid El-Amin, who was a star point guard for UConn and was a sophomore in 1999 when they won their championship with UConn. And so his freshman year, he was the Big East freshman or rookie of the year, as they call it, and is currently the head coach at Anoka Ramsey Community College. And so we're so proud of our homeboy. Like, I just always love when we have touches in our community with people that have done phenomenal things. And so all I can envision when I remember watching that game is when they won and Khalid jumped up on the the people's table and it's just like rooting. And it was just the cutest thing. And, he's an amazing man and has grown into a community leader. And I'm just so proud of him.
Awesome. One last thing, are you still in Cleveland, or you left right away after the game? Or
so I left yesterday, and so as many people know, Cleveland was in the path of the eclipse, right? And
that's
so,
the question, yeah.
Right, and so I wanted to share my experience in my ride share heading to the airport at the exact time that we were going into a total eclipse in Cleveland. And so if we can show, there's a picture of me that's when I reached the airport. So you can see that there's some sunlight, but this is intentionally black. Why? Because this is 3:15 in the afternoon, and this is what it looked like trying to take a picture out of the window in my ride share.
So for our radio listeners, you've got to use your mind's eye. And what your mind's eye is going to show you is a sky that is completely black. It's a black image. Go ahead.
Yes, indeed. And so then there's one more picture that I wanted to share. And this is when I first got into the ride share. And it's only a 7-minute ride from where I got into the ride share to the airport. So you can imagine during that 7 minutes, that it went from this to totally black to back to where there's sunlight again by the time I got out of this ride share. And so when so it's really, really cool when people talk about, it almost even being a spiritual experience, because I mean, how often are you going to be able to have that type of juxtaposition of the planet and experience that, you know what I'm saying? And so it was very, very, very cool. And ironic, of course, that I had a chance to be in Cleveland, the direct path of totality with the eclipse. So I'm very grateful for that as well. So I'm grateful to you because, you give me the opportunity to just bop around and experience these things as well. So, but yeah, I guess there's supposed to be another eclipse in our lifetime, but it won't be in the path of the United States. And so we'll stay in tune with that as well and give more highlights of those types of experiences as well. So if I can say one last thing before I hop off of here, the Wellness, Wealth, and Winning Conference that was hosted by our Tall Girls United organization was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. We have a national magazine that is going to be featuring our events, our brunch, as well as our fashion show. Again, we had the very first metaverse model in our show, and people were gasping because they had to look at a screen first to see the model showing the NFT design dress, and then they were able to see an actual runway in person, what the dress looked like on the our human model. So we're trying to be innovative, cutting edge.
Into the future. There we go. Coach Leah, thank you so much, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Before I pivot to our next guest and my colleagues, I want to take a second again to remind you that this is the Conversation with Al McFarlane, and we're broadcasting live on KFAI. And it's important for me to remind you that this relationship is unique and special and important. And it's important because we are bringing just a variety of voices and points of view, stories, interest, ideas from around the community and around the world. And what we want to do, Miguel is with me from KFAI. We want you to appreciate and what we're doing, like we appreciate you, the audience, for being committed to building sustainable communities and communities that work for all of us. Miguel, we're doing such great stuff here at KFAI. How does it feel to you?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely a privilege to be able to, produce and help share content of just underrepresented communities, cultures, and just stories. And I've really been digging the conversation, especially these past couple months. Following along with Coach Leah and all of the college basketball kind of insights and stories that come along with it. And it's, where else are you going to, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, or where else you're going to hear that, on the radio airwaves. And you can find it right here on the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I just want to add that we are $26 away from $17,000. And so, one of the things I like about the 1 p.m. hour, it's kind of like it's like the mini rush hour where everybody's out driving, going to lunch, coming back. And many times I get hit up like that's when folks are listening. And so they are telling me about what they heard on the Conversation or other 1 p.m. shows across the strip as well. And so people are talking, and I think they get the impression that, this is a news angle, a community story that I have yet to hear on local or national news. And so outlets like the Conversation with Al McFarlane and other KFAI public affair programming, I mean, that's kind of our job, is to kind of help fill in these gaps that are just there, left by mainstream and media that you consume every day. So this is why it's important to support community radio. Like I said, we're just $26 short of 17 grand. You can give us a call and get us over that milestone. You can call 612-375-9030, or whenever you do get a moment, you can also give online at kfai.org.
So $26 away from 17,000.
Oh yeah.
Wouldn't it be great to blow that out in a quick second, a quick minute? But also the next message be we're so close to 18,000. So that's what I'm projecting that we want to get before we're over with a message saying that we're so far along. And thank you. The number is 612-375-9030. Call right now and call somebody else and let them know that this pledge drive is going on, the membership drive is going on here at KFAI, and that they should join like you. Thank you so much. Well, let me expand our conversation and bring in my colleague and one of my co-hosts today, and that's Dr. Irma McLaurin. And Irma, how you doing? Where are you? You down south or out east?
South. I'm here in Mobile, Alabama, not far from Africa Town, and I'm having a great time. And I brought some of my friends with me.
Let's go right into it. Who have you got? And you've got an important event that you did, right?
Yes. So on Sunday, I was privileged to be able to attend the Plateau Pacers Women's Empowerment Tea. This is its second annual event, and it was founded by Miss Rochelle Edwards and her host of wonderful women. And she's here with me, as well as Miss Adrienne Jackson, who did what I consider the most diverse and inclusive fashion show. And then we also has Mrs. Dell Robertson, who was one of the models in the most diverse and inclusive fashion show. So if we could bring them on, it would be great.
Sure. And go ahead and introduce them and bring them into the conversation.
Okay. So we have Miss Dell Randolph. I think she's trying to get her camera there. But we have Miss Adrienne Jackson, who actually was the person who came up with the idea of the fashion show. And then is Miss Rochelle Edwards on yet?
Yes, she is.
Okay, so Miss Rochelle, there you are. So Miss Rochelle actually is the person who organized the Empowerment Tea. She is a third generation resident of Plateau, Alabama, which is where Africatown is located. And Miss Rochelle, could you tell us a bit about why you created this event? When did you create it and why you created it?
I created this event. This is our second annual, and I have a nonprofit organization, as you told them, Africatown Plateau Pacers. And the purpose of my nonprofit is to motivate and inspire others to get healthy by walking, and then inspire women to be the best.
No, we might have lost your audio for a second.
Okay. But part of the
Church
show
or
included
something going on.
Okay.
So I wanted to bring that back to fold. So I wanted everybody to dress up in their spring outfits, spring color dresses, and fascinators. So that, you know, illuminated the day with you seeing all different types of hats. And when Adrian came in with the fashion show and they had all these beautiful vibrant colors and those hats, that made the whole show. But the speakers on the show were to motivate, inspire, and, you know, give some good wording. And we had a little church. It was just a very good event to motivate.
Oh, these pictures are wonderful.
Yes, and so as you can
Irma,
see, I was able to get dressed up. This is Miss Adrian who's with me. And I pulled out, it's not often I get to dress up, and so I enjoyed that. But I'd like to turn to Miss Adrian, who was the person who came up with the idea for the fashion show, and just help us understand what you had in mind for this.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian. Actually, Rochelle came up with the idea of the fashion show, but I came up with the theme of the fashion show, which was Derby, to go along with her tea. You know, the fascinators with the tea. I'm a local boutique owner here in Mobile, and we kind of, you know, got together and did everything. Just did it together. Yeah, but she kind of pushed me along with, and I appreciate it, you know, pushed me along to do it.
Because
So,
she
And
doesn't
so-
like to talk.
no,
So
I
we
don't.
have to push.
Well, before we bring on
We
the
have to
next
push her.
person, okay, I want to, maybe you can show us, Cooper, some of the images from the fashion show, because there we are. This is Mrs. Dell Robinson, who was one of the most diverse people, and she strutted that runway in her electric wheelchair. And Miss Robinson, Mrs. Dale, can you just tell us, what did it feel like for you to be part of a fashion show? And tell us a bit about yourself.
you have to unmute.
Okay, I think you have to unmute. Okay, we have to turn on your, there you
we
go.
Okay, hello.
Hi.
I'm Dell Randolph.
Randolph, my sorry. Okay.
That's okay. I'm Dell Randolph, and I might have a bad connection. I ended up in the car driving, so I had to come to the store. So, but I hope you all can hear me well.
We
do.
can.
Okay. I'm Dell Randolph, and as she says, I strutted down the runway in my electric wheelchair. And I am I'm 62 years old. I started modeling at 55.
Ah.
Yes, and October the 21st, 21 is when they found I'm cancer free. They found cancer in my right calf, and so I had to be amputated. So it's been like probably since 21. But God is so amazing. I'm alive, and I just want everybody to know that, you know, He's in control of everything, and all you got to do is just have the will to live and trust God, and He'll do everything else and make everything else possible. So I love Adrian. Adrian has some of the greatest fashions it is, and I love fashion. So when she asked me, did I know any models and did I want to model? Of course, yeah. You know, I'm so excited. So I gathered up a few models along with her daughter-in-law, and some other her friends that she know, and we just came together, and it was just amazing how it came together and everything. So I was just blessed to be a part of it. Like I said, I've been modeling now for a little while, but even when I had God took the handicap away. So I don't consider myself as being handicapped. I just get to sit down and enjoy everything instead of walking so much. But I'm excited about getting my leg to start walking again. But in the meantime, I have to do what God called me to do. And that's to be an inspiration to each and every person. So if I can strut down that runway and twirl in this chair and smile at people to let them know you can still be sexy in the chair. That's what somebody told me that day. They're
And
like, girl,
believe
you
me,
sexy. You make somebody want
you
to be in
worked
a
that, you
wheelchair.
worked it, you worked
Yeah.
it.
And she
And I
glad.
think that is what's so amazing about this, that if you see, one is that the show was intergenerational. So thank you, Ms. Randolph, in pulling together all of this, but also it celebrated all body types, that there are people of many different kinds of body types. And instead of shaming, I'm thinking of Lizzo's song, did anybody tell you you're special? Because that's what I saw in this fashion show, is women who walked in such a way or rode themselves in such a way that they let us know that they were special, that they appreciated themselves, that they had something to offer in terms of what they look like. And we all had an opportunity to dress up, because I think sometimes we forget in this very sort of technology driven world what it means, not just to dress up for other people, but to dress up for ourselves. And I think the
Yes.
fashion show, and the empowerment tea actually gave people that motivation. And so we see multiple generations of this. Yes.
Everybody looks so beautiful, and like you say, the diversity of everybody. You even see baby girl in the middle, and
Yes.
she strutted her stuff. She opened the show up for us, and she strutted her stuff. And also the young lady that in the green with the romper on. I love
Mhm.
to tell people that she's a pastor, and for her to be a Christian, and then people know, look, you can still have fun, you can still live. And that part right there be amazing to me, because the world needs to know, just because you save, you ain't got to dress like this, you can just be yourself. God didn't change it. He want us to be ourselves, but in love. And
and
she
that
just,
and that is the purpose of the
yes,
empowerment tea, to like I said, we want to motivate, we want to inspire, we want to, you are beautiful. That's the quote of it: you are beautiful. So that
yes,
I think will stay my theme. I'm not going to change that. It's going to be, our third annual coming up, and like I told Adrian, she take the wheel for the fashion show, because that's her baby. So as they stated Sunday, we got more people want to be involved. We got the city of Mobile who wants to be a part of it now. So this is going, but what I don't want to do, and I was telling Adrian, I don't want to take it out of the Africatown community, because sometimes when you grow a little bit bigger, well, let's move it here. No, it is a part of this community, and like Adrian says, her roots is in this community as well. All of us, me and her, we grew up in Plateau Africatown, so we don't want to take it out of Africatown, regardless of how it grows.
And what
It
I
is
want
for
to
this
do is
community.
And what I want to do, Al, is highlight for people who are listening the spirit of Africa Town, and the spirit of community is so palpable there. So I actually, when I can, I drive about 20 minutes or about 15 minutes to go every Tuesday and Thursday, because Miss Rochelle has also created a cardio class, and it's only half an hour. And people might say, well, that seems like a long drive to go for such a short time, but it's really not about the time. It's about the sense of community, because what you see when they organize events is that it's the village that comes together to help her put things up, to help her take things down, to organize fashion shows, to participate in these things. And I think that's something that, as we are moving into this culture of erasure, of Black history and culture, that we need to remember that it is our community that is going to help us survive and be resilient. Not
It's your
policy, not
village.
laws, but our community, our village.
Mm-hmm.
Irma, take a minute and maybe you and your guests talk about the significance of Africa Town. I've just become aware of Africa Town in the past several years, reading the story of Cujo and reading and being involved in programs presenting the story about the Clotilda, the ship that brought the last cargo of human beings as for enslavement after slavery was illegal, after the transport of enslaved human beings was illegal. But talk about the significance of Africa Town. It's really a global treasure and monument, and the people in Africa Town represent a lineage that is rare, unique, that needs to be understood, elevated, celebrated. What do you think, Irma?
Well, I think there are two lineages in Africa Town. Before
It
the
is.
people were brought here, there were already second and third generations, or at least second generations of enslaved people who had been born on American soil. And so those are the people who helped the people who came on the Clotilda to make the transition. So we can't just what we tend to do is focus on one thing. And I
Right.
think what we have to
Exactly.
do is focus on the totality that the community of Africa Town, which is Plateau Africa Town, and it used to be Plateau Magazine and Africa Town, that all of that community is made up of diversity. So there are people who were descendants of enslaved people, and then there are people who are descendants of the people who came on the Clotilda. And the Clotilda is the only known slave ship in the United States. It is in the Mobile River. It was sunk after they took the enslaved people out, and they were brought to the United States 50 years after slavery had been officially declared illegal. They were enslaved for 15 years. So part of why people are interested, it's kind of like the Gullah culture, is that they still had memories of Africa, which many of us who are descendants of enslaved people don't necessarily have. And they pass those stories on. It's only in the last few years that the nation has taken interest in it. But the people of Africa Town, all aspects of it, those who are descendants of enslaved people, those who are descendants of the people from the Clotilda, they know their history. Miss Rochelle herself is a third generation. She is living in the house that her grandfather built. So you have this amazing diversity. And what I've seen are people who might have a house there that was left to them, but they hadn't been coming back. And now they're starting to come back because of the national attention. Africa Town is featured in a documentary called Descendants on Netflix. Anderson Cooper has been there twice. He just did a piece on 60 Minutes. Soledad O'Brien has come. So suddenly everybody is discovering. But I think what Miss Rochelle is trying to say is that Africa Town belongs to its residents. And what often happens is that when people discover something, they want to take it out and they want to own it. And what she's trying to do, to me, is maintain that spirit of community, that all of us are in this together. And I feel privileged that they've permitted me, without even knowing who I am, they've always welcomed me to say, hey, you want to participate and be a part. And that's something that I've not experienced a lot in many of the places. And I've lived in 9 different states. And people say, well, when are you coming back to Raleigh? And I say, why? Because I like Mobile. I like being in this environment where people are friendly and welcoming, and that they understand that it takes a community.
Okay, internet connection is becoming unstable. So if I get kicked off, Irma, you keep the conversation going. I want to thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Miss Adrian and Miss Dell and Miss Rochelle, for what you've done, and count on us to support what you're doing in the future. Sister Dell, your energy is just warm and inviting and courageous. So I want to give you kudos on top of kudos for being Dell Randolph, amazing, amazing, amazing. Keep up the good work.
And keep up the good work,
Thank
Miss
you.
Rochelle. I'm actually going to be writing an article that will appear in Insight News, so I'll make sure that you all get copies of it. And we'll be showing some of the photographs that I took. So I have photographs of you, Miss Adrian. I have your photograph as well. And so we're going to try and make sure that the world knows about Plateau
Yes.
Africa Town and the Women's Empowerment Tea.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Irma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for
Thank
having
you. Thank you.
Right.
getting notes.
Okay.
I'm out. God
Thank
bless.
you.
Thank you.
Yes. And I think, Al, this is a nice
All right.
segue into the fact that at the same moment that we're celebrating this most inclusive and diverse event, that the governor of Alabama has signed into law a legislation that says it's illegal to talk about diversity. She's trying to eliminate, she's going the way of DeSantis, the way that, you know, the state of Iowa has gone. And people must remember, these are not recent events. Years ago, Texas had already declared it was illegal to teach Latin American history in schools. So what we're seeing is a trend of what I have called over time, the reclamation of whiteness. And what is happening is that those who are in the dominant culture are trying to erase knowledge. It's almost like people who want to say the Holocaust was a fake. They now want to say slavery was actually not that bad. It gave us skills that allowed us to now be who we are today. I mean, it's so ludicrous that it would even come out of people's mouths. But this is where we're going. So they're banning the notion of diversity. And what will happen is what people don't understand, and white people need to understand this, you will then have your children who are culturally illiterate, racially illiterate, only know a small portion of a whitewashed American history. And then they will wonder when they encounter people in the world why they don't understand what's going on. The world is diverse. Those of European descent constitute a very small portion of the global population, a very small portion. And as people mix, that population is becoming even smaller. And so this is an attempt to do what George Wallace tried to do years ago when he talked about segregation today, segregation yesterday, segregation every day. Now we're trying to say no diversity. You can't critique people for the history. You can't. So they're really trying to siphon off an aspect of American history that is factual, that is documented. The United States government and its people participated in what we now call human trafficking. They enslaved hundreds of people. And the living proof of that is the slave ship that is in Mobile, Alabama Bay, where through radar sonar, they actually can see the hull where 110 people were made to stay together, to defecate together in that space, to eat in that space, to do everything in a space like sardines. That was what we did. And today we would call that human trafficking, right? That was considered legal. To try and erase that fact means that you just want people to have partial history. And so that's like living in La La Land. Okay, you can try and live in that, but the reality is that you cannot erase the past.
Elon Musk, however, is saying that DEI must, he says that the point of, civil rights and diversity is to end discrimination, but not to replace it with a different kind of discrimination. What do you think of that? Because that's what's kind of fueling that white supremacist resentment and fragility, right?
Well,
they are feeling like they're being picked on.
Yeah, it is a part of American culture, which is our radical individualism, where on the one hand, we all want to feel like we're special. That's what we've been socialized to believe. And for white people who have had the dominant culture and had things in their favor, they don't like losing privilege. So people need to understand, when you ask people to be inclusive, you're really asking them to relinquish an aspect of privilege in which they were sort of the only ones who had this. People don't like to give up power. Frederick Douglass said it all. Those who want change, they want it as if it doesn't have any implications. You cannot have change. You cannot have rain without thunder and lightning, right? So you cannot have change and inclusiveness without somebody having to give up something. Given the fact that they've had this excessively, it's not like they're losing anything, but in their minds, that's what they believe it to be, a loss. And so they're resisting this. They want to try and erase it. My response is, it's too late to put the black genie back in the box. We're not going back, okay? We have too much education, which is very different from 50 years ago of the civil rights movement. We have people who have access to knowledge and resources that we didn't have back then. So you're not going to push us to the back of the bus, because sometimes we now own the bus. We're driving the bus. We know that we have a right to be on that bus. But when you don't educate children, when you give them partial histories, their explanation is, we didn't know. And this is where museums and our archives become important, because we're now going to have to teach our children how to go to archives and look up primary material, because we have no, we're not sure if they're actually going to get that information in schools. What governor of Alabama is trying to do, what DeSantis has done. DeSantis fired everybody who had diversity in their title in the state of Florida. Lord, I'm so glad I don't live there now. I'm happy that I'm retired, even in Alabama, because I don't owe anybody anything. But this is the reality that we're living in, is that there is this attempt to really eradicate or erase the ideas that we have struggled so hard, that people died. Black people died. They had their heads beaten in, like, John Lewis, in order for us to be even having this conversation. I want to alert people that it becomes places like Black newspapers. If we start with David Walker's Appeal, if we then go to the founding of the North Star newspaper by Frederick Douglass, it was Black newspapers that always kept us grounded and knowledgeable about what was going on, because we understood that white newspapers were only giving us partial history. And you actually have white newspapers, like I think it was the Baltimore Sun, and even the Raleigh newspaper, News and Observer, that have acknowledged that they only gave partial news, that they were not being objective. They were being very partial and actually fueled race riots and race conflict. And so I think that is one of the things that people have to keep in mind. And I want to give kudos to KFAI Radio. I will be signing in to give my contribution, even though I don't live in Minnesota. I think it is going to be, it has been an important voice. I remember listening to it when I was there. And I think people have to understand to support the Conversation with Al McFarlane by subscribing, to support the Insight News by subscribing, and to support KFAI by making contributions during this fundraising period. If we don't protect these things, if we don't support them, then we will have a knowledge void. And that's what we need to avoid doing.
Well, good, Irma. Thank you for subscribing. And I guess there's a note here from the station saying we just passed the 17,000. So thanks to our subscribers, and thanks to all of you for listening and acting. And let's push the goal to 18,000. And it's never too late. Every contribution is important. Every listener, every viewer is important. So thank you so much. Let me take this opportunity to pivot to bring in our colleague Yoji Senna, who joins us every week from Bahia in Brazil. And Yoji, we were talking about Elon Musk, for example, but you also are looking at the impact of his philosophy and strategy. He's being investigated over fake news and obstruction in Brazil after a Supreme Court order. Yoji, good afternoon. First of all, how you doing, my friend? and walk us through what's going on with Elon Musk and make the connection between this idea of him deciding that DEI is unimportant and how he's showing up in Brazil and other places in the world as well.
Yeah, greetings everybody. Nice to see Dr. Irma again.
Yes.
And so Elon Musk is one of the most talked person, I would say, in the last 3 days here in Brazil in the news. He's really has catalyzed the the press and the politicians with his declarations, his personal attacks on the president of the Brazilian Supreme Court. His name is Alexandre de Moraes. Um, de Moraes has been instrumental into the uh, defense of democracy in Brazil. Already in the government of the last president Bolsonaro, he was the resistance, and now with Lula, he's leading the investigations to responsabilize everybody who participate, from the people who were in the streets up to the president and the generals that were part of the complot. So Elon Musk, 3 days ago, came with a tweet of X, whatever you want to call it, uh, with the question, uh, how is Alexandre Moraes such a dictator, right? And that has aroused a strong response from the government and from the press, where he's now investigated by the federal police, which is the Brazilian FBI. He's gonna be investigated in a parliamentary commission also, and um, he's in X is in the edge of being highly regulated. So he aroused the conversation in Brazil about regulating the social media. There is a little resistance of the Congress because has a predominance of center-right legislators, but and this reticence of the parliament of taking action will bring to Alexandre Moraes to take a resolution, which has been who, as I say earlier, has saved Brazil from the attempted coup of Bolsonaro. So, and the press here was highlighting that supposedly Elon Musk is voicing or revolting against this dictatorship or censorship that is being planted in Brazil, but he's absolutely mute about China, where X is banned, but he don't say nothing about the Chinese government being also practicing censorship and other governments that are authoritarian in the world. So he's even is going. There's a threat now that the government will suspend the contract they have with SpaceX, no, with Starlink, sorry, to provide internet connections to the remote areas of the Amazon. So he's in evidence here, and everything is in certain way going against him here. He kind of shoot himself on the foot. I think he's under the presumption that Brazil is still a third world country, and he could just budge the orders of the Supreme Court here, or of the justice in general. So this afternoon, the lawyers for X in Brazil say they don't have any power to enforce any ban because those powers are in the offices in the U.S. and in Ireland. So so it's just everything they just creating more complications to their future, here in Brazil.
Yeah. And I think I see that Cooper gave us a note that he apparently caved to the Indian government, removing a BBC documentary that was critical of Modi in India. And so he seems to be in support of dictators and not in support of those who champion democracy. And I think, I have to now go back and archive all my tweets, but I think people are leaving the Twitter universe because his politics suggest. So the question is, if we stay on it, are we endorsing his politics? I mean, I think this is really problematic because it has been a conduit for people to share ideas and have things to speak. And so that's just something to think about. Yeah.
Irma, I wanted to get a sense of what you thought about, you and Yoji thought about drawing the connection between Elon Musk represents an emergence of this affinity for dictatorship, for oligarchical configuration of society. The rich and the powerful believe they have the right, that they are ordained to rule the world. They won't use the word rule, but they want the freedom to decide what the world can be and will be. It's as if the world was their idea. So there's that thread emerging throughout the world, I believe. I think you point to dictatorships in Africa, dictatorships in Europe, the Soviet Union or Russia, and you point to Donald Trump, his intention, his vision, his declaration that he would be dictator for a day, presenting that as if it was tongue in cheek, but it's damn scary.
Reality. It's and
scary.
It is someone who has the resources of people with tremendous money to actually potentially. So here is someone who has been very clearly a criminal, and yet people are sending him money and supporting him. Elon Musk is among those groups. There was a musical at some point that had a song that said, "What's good for General Motors is good for the USA." And I think what's happening now is that we're back at that moment in time in which a very small fraction of the country that has money, believes that they have the right, that they are entitled to be able to make decisions, not just in the United States, but globally, for people who don't have those same resources. And that is the powerful wanting to decide what is best. It is a form of what we would call Darwinism, social Darwinism, where they believe because they are rich and famous or because they have power and privilege, therefore they have a divine, a natural right, which was what social Darwinism was implying, is that some people are born to be leaders and some people are born to follow, and believe, and trying to make this a biological argument that inherently those who have amassed, power and privilege were naturally selected for that. When in fact, these are people who have been criminals, whose histories are rooted in people doing, criminal activities, who have used, slavery and other things to build their wealth, and then make it look like they actually earned it, which is not the case.
And I think part of the need is for us to change the vocabulary, how we discuss these things. And I have recently heard people describe, the founding of this country as a criminal enterprise. And so, what do you mean? How can you say that? Democracy, America, the beautiful, et cetera. But I go back and think, if you were in England or in Britain, and these guys across the water that you gave your money to get them set up decided they wanted to cut you out of the deal, you would be viewed as a criminal element that was disrupting the power equation of the day. Well, that's kind of how our country has also cast or portrayed Black people, people that this country disadvantaged by enslavement, but then wants to create a public persona of Black people as criminal. And the truth is, who's painting that picture is the owner of the criminal enterprise itself. And at some point in time, I think we have to get to where we start reframing how we view and talk about these power dynamics and call them criminal, because that's what they are. What do you think?
Well, I would say that just the notion of, calling the affirmation and the attempt to, in some ways, do social reparations, which is what affirmative action and diversity were attempting to do, is a form of discrimination, is really sort of twisting the concept and turning it on its head. And the people who are doing this are people who are trying to reinstitute their power. There is no such thing as Black racism, because racism is a structural power structure that requires people to have the means of control. We don't have any institutions that we own. We don't have any, corporations that we own. And so we're not in a position to really impose upon white people discrimination. Do we have prejudice? Why not? Probably because of the nature of the relationships and the interaction. But the notion of reverse racism was the term that they threw out. Now they're calling diversity, racism. And this is what people in power do. They take the language that we have, they appropriate it. This is what happened to the term politically correct. It was turned on its head to be a way to critique anyone who was critical of their behavior, who was looking at power dynamics. And so if you say to someone, you're just being politically correct, you could then suddenly dismiss them because it's now become a catchphrase for anything and everything. This is what's happening, around all of this. And so, as you say, language is very important. We need to call out the fact that I tell people I don't subscribe to the notion of reverse racism or that diversity is discriminatory. But we have to begin to educate outside of schools. We can no longer rely upon K through 12 or even higher education to give us factual information. We need to go back to remember those community schools, those Black Panther, those New Africa House, where we used to have those weekend academies where we would give additional information. I think we have to get back to that. And I think the newspaper and this show is one of the means of doing that.
Let me pivot quickly for the last couple of minutes. Minnesota Supreme Court is going to hear arguments on the restoration of voting rights for felons. And the law passed last year reinstated voting rights to about 55,000 individuals who are on probation or supervision and work release. The Minnesota Voters Alliance challenged the law, arguing that it violates the state constitution. An Anoka County judge, Thomas Lehman, overruled the challenge, but it's now appealed to the Supreme Court. And advocates stress that the disproportionate impact on people of color and the importance of protecting voting rights, a decision should happen. What about that? So, our legislature went through the work of determining, that this is structural exclusion. It amounts to that because of the 55,000 individuals, an inordinate number given the population and demographics, are Black people. Black people being systematically kept off the voting rolls. And that's not just Minnesota, it's nationwide. It's voter.
It's a form of poll tax. It is replicating in a different way poll tax. And these are the same people who put Trump, who is a known criminal, into office, but they want, and they're still ready to elect him for president, yet they want to keep people who have, the whole point of incarceration and justice was to rehabilitate. And if people are rehabilitating and they're no longer engaged in criminal activities, then why they should not be allowed to vote? Because it would give us an advantage. And so anytime that we seem to have an advantage in the arena of voting, the powers that be that are white want to take it away and challenge it.
Yoji, the last 30 seconds belong to you.
Well, I just want to agree with you both say today. It seems that since its inception, the United States is a criminal organization through slavery, to what you did from the perspective, you say it from the perspective of England, genocide of the Native American enslavement of African people, and they have been deciding what's going on in the world. It's not just this presumption that they want to do it now. they have been dictating what's been going on the world since the Monroe Doctrine was released. And I also want to tell you that Modri, the guy from India, he's a right wing. You know,
Of
we have
course.
that story that India, he seems to be peace and love yoga guy, but he is one of the precursors of this movement of right wing leaders in the world,
Yes.
along with Putin since 2012. So he's one of the longest, as well. Xi Jinping in China, even though that
We
is a
got to
communist
drop it there.
country.
We're out of time, Yoji, thank you so much.
But your point is well taken.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. Thanks, Yoji. Thanks, Irma.
Thank you.
Yeah.